It's time for this week's episode of Brandon Sports Talk, featuring in-depth interviews from those who are trending in the world of athletics. And now, here's the host of Brandon Sports Talk, Brandon Pate.
Welcome back to Brandon Sports Talk. In today's episode, I have the privilege to interview the South Carolina Stingrays color commentator, Nick Harvey. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Back in school full time with some in-person classes. So being back in Columbia on campus has been pretty great so far. And, just enjoying it every step of the way, getting to enjoy some football in person this year. So that's been a huge privilege for us, to be able to enjoy it with the whole pandemic going on still. It's been really great to have some in-person sports back in action.
That's wonderful. Can you talk about how you knew that you wanted to be a color commentator?
Yeah, so my uncle was an ESPN radio disc jockey basically for a while. He did some sports radio work in Charleston, South Carolina, and he passed away before I was born. But I was always told that I was kind of a mirror image of him. We share the same name. We're both Nicks, and he was a huge sports fan and loved what he did. And as I grew up, I learned more and more about him and realized that that's something that I kind of wanted to pursue, was getting into sports, and getting the opportunity to be a color commentator was the good start for me. So taking the opportunity with the Stingrays was a lot of fun, and it kind of taught me a little bit more on the other side of play-by-play type things. Is there's so much statistical research that you do and so much preparedness that you have to be ready to come out, with these facts during the game when plays stopped and you're not talking about what's going on right then. You got to talk a little bit more about, who's doing what, who's going to make an impact tonight. And it got to be a lot of fun throughout the year. At first I was kind of nervous. I didn't know what I was going to do. I didn't know my attack strategy going into these games, but getting further and further into the season, I enjoyed it so much to know exactly what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it during our broadcasts, to be able to highlight the different talents in the ECHL.
What was it like working as the broadcaster for the Charlton Colonials?
Yeah, working with Charleston was a lot of fun. The Colonials were a junior team that came into Charleston roughly 2 or 3 years ago. It was my senior year of high school, and I had just finished calling a game in Orlando for the Stingrays. I wasn't affiliated with the Stingrays, so I wasn't working with or in any way, shape, or form technically a team member with the Stingrays. But we found out that Jared Shaffrin, who was my play-by-play commentator last year, wasn't going to be in Orlando to call the game. He was going to be doing the social media stuff from home. And my mom and I were down there for the game. We said, this is what you want to do. Why not take a shot at it? We went to Best Buy, bought a little cheap microphone. I say cheap. It wasn't cheap by any means, but it was not the top of the line stuff that you see sports broadcasters use nowadays. But it was a little pocket mic that connected directly to my phone. And I ended up commentating that game. And soon after, I was reached out to by the Colonials. And I got to commentate, with guys that were my age, working with the Colonials in the USPHL. They're all guys who are 17, 18, up to 20 years old. And me being 19 now, I was 18 at the time, so I was working with these guys who were my age, playing the sport that I loved and what I wanted to do for a living, calling games. And it was just so much fun. I mean, getting to watch these guys develop as I was developing myself, doing interviews. And it was a great group of guys, a good organization. I had a lot of fun with them. Unfortunately, they're not playing this year. They are taking a break from league play. So we'll see what their next steps are, but I wish all the best to that organization. They were good to me.
What were some of your roles as the broadcaster?
So I was in charge during games. I was not only commentating on hockey TV, I was also quite often doing the social media. So I would end up tweeting out scoring updates in between periods, or if I was just getting interviews pre and post game. I did this thing called the locker room lowdown with the Colonials equipment manager, and we would kind of talk about specifics in the locker room, some of the fun things that you want to talk about, like what kind of guys are divas, if you will, about how they do their equipment and how they get their stuff ready before a game, and what guys are very chill about what they want to do. They just say whatever you do is going to work for me. And we had fun doing that. But interviewing the players, those guys wanted to be highlighted. They're young and they love the spotlight. So getting to interview those guys and be right there next to them, running the social media and all that was a lot of fun. But that was a lot of what I did, was the commentary, coaches interviews, staff interviews, and player interviews, as well as the social media stuff with game updates and results and graphics for all that was basically what I ran.
What was it like whenever you got the opportunity to be the color commentator for the South Carolina Stingrays?
That's a great question. It was kind of a whirlwind. It came as a shock to me because I had filled in with the Stingrays for, I think, probably 3 or 4 games in the season prior to last year, before COVID shut them down. Because I was with the Colonials, and there was a writer for the Post and Courier in Charleston who was the color commentator for years for the Stingrays, and he got moved after COVID happened. He got moved from the sports column to just writing about general news, and didn't have the same schedule to be able to make Stingrays games. So I was called in, I think probably October, or maybe it could have been September. I think it was September, because the season didn't start until November, December last year. Because of COVID, they had to move the whole scheduling around to make sure it was going to work for all the teams to be able to play at a certain time with restrictions and whatnot. So I got that call, and it was like I said, my stomach kind of dropped. It was absolutely insane, because I grew up a Stingrays fan. I only lived 45 minutes away. We were season ticket holders from the time before I was born. My parents had been season ticket holders since this team inaugurated in 1993. So growing up as a diehard fan, and then getting the opportunity to work for the team and be on the radio and see those moments unfold before your eyes, and then being able to talk about it, and everybody is paying attention to, what do these guys have to say about it? That was surreal to me, to be able to deliver these breaking moments in the games and all these big moments. A team that was struggling for a majority of the season found their stride at the right time. They eliminate the first seed in the playoffs. They get all the way to the Kelly Cup final. I couldn't have asked for a better first season as a professional commentator with the Stingrays than to go on a cup run with the team that I grew up supporting. It was unbelievable.
Of course, as you talked about growing up watching them, what was it like, obviously, growing up watching them and now getting to obviously be a professional covering them?
Yeah, it's definitely different. Because growing up, I was that kid who was always screaming, and I was cheering so hard for the team, and I was yelling at the refs, and there was all the playful banter that you get to do as a fan. And you lose a little bit of that when you become a commentator, needless to say. You don't get the opportunity to voice your honest opinion without some repercussions. So learning the professional art of broadcasting and getting into it as a manner of, I am giving you an unbiased opinion of what's going on in this game, who's playing better hockey, who is struggling, anything that involves the game, you have to cover it both ways. And I learned that really quickly working for the Stingrays this past year, and with Jared. That was one of the biggest things, is I think we had one of the most unbiased broadcasts that you could ask for. We tried to be as fair as we possibly could for both teams. If there was a penalty call missed, we would talk about it. It would be the Stingrays just got lucky. They definitely missed that penalty, and the Stingrays aren't going to go to the box. Or on the other hand, it would be, the Stingrays are a little bit unfortunate here because they're not going to get that penalty call. But all in all, you had to make sure that you were making a fair point about it. If it was a call that should have been called, then you talk about how it should have been. And if it wasn't, then you basically say, look, the penalty was called, it shouldn't have been, but there's nothing you could do about it at that point. We tried to be as even as possible, no matter who we were playing.
Of course, how do you balance between obviously being a fan of the Stingrays, growing up watching them, and looking up to those players versus now working with those players as a color commentator and y'all both being professional athletes and people?
Yeah, it's interesting because like you said, I looked up to those guys when I was younger, and there's still an age gap there because I'm much younger than a lot of the guys who play in this league. It is a developmental league, but you notice a lot of the prospects in the NHL, if they're 18, 19, 20 years old, they're normally already in the NHL because they've got that talent. They don't need a lot of room to develop. They get put right into the mix. But playing with some of those guys who, a year prior, I was cheering for a lot of the guys who were playing for the Stingrays the year that I joined as the color commentator this past season. So cheering for all these guys and then working with them on a professional level, there's a very distinct difference because you have to handle yourself professionally. You can't show, like, let me take a picture with you, like, let me get your autograph. It's not like that when you're the commentator because you see these guys on a regular basis and you quickly get good relationships with them. The friendships that I formed, and it was weird for me because COVID last year, I was restricted from what I could do, and I wasn't allowed to go into the locker room with the team or anything like that because of the COVID restrictions that the league had placed. So we didn't do really any of that until we traveled with the team to Fort Wayne for the Kelly Cup finals. But even in the week that we were in Fort Wayne, I formed some really good friendships and some good relationships and connections with those guys who play for the Stingrays. And those are memories that I'll cherish forever, is, at one point being a fan and then spending a week with these guys as if they're your best friends and you've known them forever. It's very different, but it's totally worth it.
What is it like being a part of the ECHL and obviously broadcasting games?
It's a lot of fun. It really is. It's so much enjoyment that there is to being in the ECHL because there's so much young talent. And I talked about a lot of the younger guys now are in the NHL, but you see so many guys who are still at the top of that list that could get called up any minute and go to the AHL and play for instance, the Stingrays affiliate, the Hershey Bears. You see so much talent come through that eventually some of them do make it to the NHL, some of them make it to the AHL, and some of them stay right there in the ECHL. But the amount of talent that comes through that league is just unparalleled to what you'll see in a lot of other minor league sports. I mean, the ECHL has produced a lot of top NHL talents, some Stanley Cup champions, and the Stingrays themselves have done that. Braden Holtby was a former South Carolina Stingray who I got to watch play, and then he went on to win a Stanley Cup with the Washington Capitals. And, it's really a good experience for not only players and staff to come up, but also broadcasters, because that league does develop broadcasters like it develops players. It gives a lot of people their shot to progress and kind of become more and more professional and better at their craft. And then when they get that call up, you're more than ready to do it.
Of course, what are some of your favorite memories and moments covering the South Carolina Stingrays?
As probably the biggest one I think that I mentioned before was going to the Kelly Cup finals. I mean, being in Fort Wayne and, getting to experience what it was like in the visiting press box, and Fort Wayne, I can't say enough good things about their arena. They were absolutely exceptional. They have a professional press box. I mean, it was like being in an NHL stadium. The crowd atmosphere was insane. And that was the first full capacity crowd we had seen probably the entire season. I mean, the game before the playoffs started, we had a home game at the Coliseum and we were full capacity, and it was just unbelievable. Or we were close to full capacity. Let me rephrase that. But Fort Wayne was full capacity for the Kelly Cup finals, and their fans were loud and proud for the games that we played there. And it was just unbelievable altogether. So getting to do that, getting to experience a cup final in a foreign atmosphere, if you will, being on the road as the visitor, it was interesting because I had only experienced traveling as a visitor, as a commentator, I should say, a few times before that. And it was just really, really cool to experience. And that's got to be, I think, my top memory was getting to be on the road with the team. We had 3-hour bus rides together and we bonded closer. We got to play for a championship. It was a lot of fun.
Of course, what are some of your future plans as a hockey commentator?
Yeah, I think one of my biggest things, I'd like to get into the play-by-play field a little bit more. I got to call a game doing play-by-play last year, and that was, a ton of fun. I got some recognition for it, and I couldn't be more appreciative of that. It makes me feel good. It makes me feel like I'm trending in the right direction. So I think future plans, I'd love to break into this league as a play-by-play broadcaster in the ECHL. I'd like to progress through the ranks just like everybody else does. In most cases, you see your way through the ECHL, the AHL, and you make it to the show at one point. For the Stingrays, Joseph Zarchewski, who was the Stingrays broadcaster from in the 2009 season, last time the Stingrays won the Kelly Cup, or excuse me, I'm sorry, a couple of years later, he was with the Rays on their Cup run in Allen. He just got his promotion to the Chicago Blackhawks broadcast team for the season. So he's going to be filling in, doing some radio commentary. And, it just shows what this league can do for young broadcasters. So I'm hoping that when I take that next step, I'll be able to develop the same way that a lot of these guys did before. And, Joey Z is one of the best out there. And I'm super excited for him. And if he sees this, I have to apologize for getting those dates wrong, because he was definitely a little bit after the Stingrays Cup championship in 2009, but he was great while he was here. He's got a very memorable voice and some very memorable calls in South Carolina.
What is it going to feel like to you, obviously, when you do get that call up to obviously move on from the Stingrays onto the higher level?
Yeah, it's going to be really rewarding to know that I've worked hard and I've, tried to better my craft, to take a bigger step and get a promotion or rewarded for doing what I do. Hoping that I can make some waves in the broadcasting field when I do move up. And I hope that, sticking with it and following exactly what I, plan to do is going to be the biggest thing. Is if I continue to do this and I do it the right way, then eventually I'm going to get that opportunity, and it's going to be surreal. It's going to be those butterflies all over again, just like I got when I got that call from the Stingrays last year.
What advice would you give hockey commentators looking to get started into the industry?
I think the biggest thing is you just have to go after it. If you're looking to get into the broadcasting industry, I found my way simply by asking questions, going up to the people who looked like they knew what I wanted to know. And you ask them questions. You ask, do you guys do internships? Do you guys allow people to shadow you while you're working? Stuff like that. If you can find those opportunities, the broadcasting field is probably what I've found is one of the most inclusive and, thoughtful fields that you could get into. They're very helpful. Any broadcaster that you go up to and ask, if you want to be on the news, you just find a newscaster and say, hey, this is what I want to do. How do I do it? Because they'll remember that. I know for a fact, Jared Shaffron, who I mentioned earlier, was my play-by-play broadcaster this past year. He just moved to Ontario, California to work in the AHL. He and I met 5 years ago when he first came to South Carolina. They had just gone on another cup run against Colorado in 2018 or so. And he was more than gracious to talk to me about what I wanted to do. I said I wanted to be a broadcaster, and he let me shadow him for a game a season after that. And then a season after that, I was working with the Colonials, and a season after that, I was working with him. So people don't forget these things. You stay in contact with them and you let them know what you're doing and what you're up to. And eventually you might get that opportunity with them. Jared was very gracious, and he helped me a lot this past season. So just finding somebody or anybody who is willing to help you and staying in contact with them, being passionate about what you want to do is going to take you places. There's no doubt about that. I figured that out this year, that just showing the passion that you have and the urge to want to do something like this. It's just a matter of finding the right people to recognize that and take advantage of it while they got the opportunity.
That's wonderful advice. Where can my listeners find you at on social media, along with the South Carolina Stingrays at?
So I am on Twitter. My Twitter is Nick Harvey PXP. My Twitter handle for my personal use. That's where I do all my regular tweets. You'll see a lot of just what I want to talk about. A lot of it has to do with sports, of course. I don't really give too much thought to a lot of other things on Twitter, but on Instagram I do have a public account. It's Nick Harvey _02. And on Facebook, Nick Harvey, LinkedIn, Nick Harvey. Those are where you'll see a lot of my posts about what I'm doing in my career. And I'd be more than happy to connect with any of your listeners if they want to reach out and talk sports or talk the broadcasting field. It'd be awesome to have a conversation with them.
That's great. Thank you again, Nick Harvey, for your interview, and best of luck in your future with the South Carolina Stingrays.
Oh, Brandon, thanks so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here.
You can find Brandon Sports Talk on Facebook at Brandon Sports Talk, Instagram at Brandon Sports Talk, Twitter at Talk_Brandon, and you can find me on YouTube at Brandon Sports Talk. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you again, Nick Harvey, for your interview, and best of luck in your future.
Thanks so much.
You've been watching Brandon Sports Talk. Please feel free to like, share, and subscribe to Brandon Sports Talk on social media and on YouTube.